Good afternoon, good morning, greetings wherever you are in the US or indeed across the world. Thanks so much for joining us today. This was a hugely popular presentation and breakout session at US Travel's ESTO conference in 2018. We presented at that point the largest ever study into US road trip travel with our very good friends at Longwoods International. And we've updated it for 2020. Road trips are going to be a massive part of the recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic, and it's a recovery that's already started. And we'll be hearing some of the updates and opportunities and news about that recovery shortly. We want to equip you with the right information and tools for maximizing the recovery and what's happening in terms of road trips in your own destination. But before we get started, we wanted to acknowledge the challenge that many of our colleagues and indeed residents, visitors in many parts of the US are dealing with right now and over recent weeks. This includes our colleagues in the West who are battling historic fires, but also our friends on the Gulf Coast who've recently and frankly right now are grappling with damaging storms. And, the combination of the crisis, whether it's natural disasters and the global pandemic is a hugely challenging situation. So our thoughts and our support are with you all. Let's move on to welcoming in a wonderful panel and set of presenters and some very familiar faces. First, our very good friend, Amir Elon, President and CEO of Longwoods International. He's going to join us first to present the findings of the updated 2020 road trips research, where we've combined both over 20 years of research into road trips by Longwoods with some of the more recent COVID-19 related research that we've been doing. Then we've got two leaders from our state tourism community. So Liz Fitzsimmons, Managing Director of the Maryland Department of Tourism, and Mike Manget, who's Commissioner of the Kentucky Department of Tourism. They're going to join us to share insights, examples, and case studies of what they're doing in their own states and some key takeaways and lessons for you to apply to your own marketing. So you can see the agenda here. We're first going to dive into that research. And we're going to review it through both the lens and opportunity of the COVID-19 crisis, but also looking back over 22 years of the sort of trends and takeaways about road trip travel in the United States, its size, significance, and the opportunity it presents. I'm going to share some quick international examples of road trips marketing from a number of countries around the world, and then Liz and Mike are going to provide those compelling case studies of road trip initiatives in Maryland and Kentucky. We'll have a panel discussion, some Q&A, and some additional resources to leave you with at the end. And a reminder, all of the resources from today, all the slides, the webinar recording, the full research deck, are all available up on this road trips website. You can see right there. We've updated it from the 2018 edition to reflect the 2020 content we're sharing with you today. And this includes an updated 4-page research summary, which we've presented in a very sort of colorful, easy to follow way. So you can download that and share that along with all the other resources, including that full research slide deck. And we've included, as I mentioned, the COVID-19 related resources that we've been sharing over the last 6+ months. So every 2 weeks, we present and share the latest COVID-19 related travel research. And in fact, Amir and I recorded this morning an update on the latest hot off the press COVID-19 related research. So he's going to cover a few data points, but the full recording, the full summary is all available right there on our COVID-19 related education portal. So without further ado, let's get straight into it. I'm going to pass it over to Amir from Longwoods International. He's going to share Those updates on road trip travel in both COVID-19 and those trends over the last 22 plus years in terms of what they see. So Amir, over to you.
Well, thank you very much, Chris. Hello, everyone. I wish we could be doing this on a stage with all of you in person, but such are the times. So let's talk about road trips. First of all, I want to thank our partners at Miles once again for commissioning this review with us and taking a look at where we've been and where we're heading, hopefully. So yeah, right. A couple years ago at ESTO, we took a look back at 20 years worth of research. We've updated it and added a few things in light of the current times. And let's see what we've come up with here for you. So let's see here. I think my ability to advance has suddenly stopped. So we can do shadow puppets here for a second. Talk amongst yourselves. Our AV folks are there to help. We've got no capacity to advance. There we go, maybe. And
do you want us to advance the slides for you, Amir?
Let's go to plan B because it's not moving here. All right, so real quickly here, this is, for long as we've been around for about 43 years, if you're not familiar with us, we've been a market research consultancy for the majority of our existence, focused on solely the travel and tourism industry. To get the data we're sharing with you today, we rely on something called Travel USA. Travel USA is the largest and longest ongoing study of traveling US households. Every year, we document somewhere between 300 to 350,000 trips taken by Americans, and we pull that information to learn so much about U.S. travelers. We're in the field year-round. We're constantly updating the surveys on a quarterly basis and so forth. So to look at this, we just had to go back a couple decades in some of our details. So next slide, please. So looking back over now 22 years at road trips and adding a little bit of what we know right now from the travel sentiment research that we've been conducting every couple of weeks since the beginning of the pandemic, we saw basically 6 key takeaways. And if you go to the next slide here, you will see takeaway number 1, we know that road trips are going to lead us into the recovery. It might seem a bit of an obvious statement, but let's dig into that just a little bit. And I'm going to share with you some of the travel sentiment research over time here. So ever since early March, we've actually been polling 1,000 traveling Americans every other week. It was weekly initially, then this summer we switched to every other week, talking to them about their sentiment towards travel. And if you look way back in the end of April, we asked this first question about what type of trip or travelers were planning to take in the next 6 months for those who were planning to travel there. And as you can see, it was road travel, travel by car. First of all, to see friends and relatives. Didn't matter if it was short or a longer trip. They were going to go see friends and relatives. And then the next biggest category, can travel for some type of vacation or getaway, also by car, much ahead of air travel. So we go to the next slide, and you'll see that this is coming from data we just released this morning from the 20th wave of our survey. You can see that just as recently as just a few days ago, 33% of American travelers said they were changing their destination from a driving destination as opposed to flying there. So the shift is happening. Folks are pulling back from air travel. They feel safer in their car, more confident about the environment they can control, and they're looking at air travel or road travel to air travel. And when we look at this trend over the beauty of doing this ongoing tracker is that you have a lot of trend lines to look at all the way back since the very beginning of March. You can see it's always been somewhere between a third and a quarter of travelers changing their plans to drive travel. So let's go to the next slide. And so this is a question that we ask going into the Labor Day holiday. We've asked this several times throughout our tracker, and right before Labor Day weekend, we asked folks, are they going to be traveling the next 6 weeks? Are they going to be traveling September, October? And if they are, what type of trip is it going to be? And you can see there that the majority of Americans are planning, or traveling Americans, are planning to take some type of trip or getaway in the next couple months here. So road travel again. And we've asked that question going into Memorial Day, into July 4th, and going to Labor Day. You can see very consistently road travel leads the way. Next slide. So we went back this past week into our survey and said, okay, for those of you who told us you're going to travel the next couple of weeks, give us a little more detail about what this trip is going to be like. You can see visiting friends and family is number one. We missed a lot of time with our friends and family, a lot of family milestones, personal milestones, holidays, etc. So there's no surprise we're going to seeking to reconnect there. But taking a road trip, number two, right there, almost 60%. There. And again, when you dig in more specifically into the activities, outdoors and historical, cultural, you can see the different types there from visiting parks, biking, etc., and all kinds of fall activities, museums, attractions, cultural things, etc. Let's go forward. We know, so that's what we know what the sentiment's telling us, that people want to hit the roads as soon as they can and as soon as they feel comfortable doing so. But now let's talk about the value of that road trip there. So the road trip in 2019, now we know 2019 was a great year, was a record year for our industry. So we'll have to reset a little bit of expectation, but I think it gives us some good context and some good precursors to what's going to be happening over the next year or so here. So we look at the overall slice of road trips here, and we're seeing that you're basically looking at 80% being adult travel, and 20% of those trips included children under the age of 18. So a lot of family travel segment as well. Let's go to the next slide. And you can see that they were spending over $51 billion. Obviously, accommodations and eating and drinking and so forth, where transportation were some of the highest costs, or expenditure, but really spending throughout the whole visitor economy. And they're a growing market. They were a growing market, and as we see from the sentiment, they're going to be a growing market, even though the market may have been resized and evolved a little bit. Next slide, please. So you can see, looking back just the last 22 years, that road trips have consistently been somewhere between 8 to 9% of the overall overnight trip market in the US. So pretty close to 10% of the market there. And now, if you look at the last decade, we've seen about 3% growth, 2 to 3% growth year over year in overall volume. So they have been growing in terms of overall volume of the market here. Next slide. And as we look back over in recent years, the three regions that we've really seen the greatest amount of growth are actually outpacing the growth in their leisure, in their general overnight leisure travel, is the Pacific Northwest. You're looking at the mountain region, and also in the East South Central region, where our good friend Mike from Kentucky is situated there. Next slide. And there's a heck of a value to road trippers. They are a high value customer for all of us. And in these days where the customers are a little more scarce, we definitely want to keep focus on these guys. So when you look at the average road trip expenditure per party, you see that the average road trip party is typically outspending a little over 20% more than your average overnight leisure travel party. So there's great value there. And of course, accommodations is a big factor in that, because they're staying longer in hotels. And here's another thing that's really important, given the times. They have a very high incidence, as you can see, of past visitation to specific destinations of interest to them. And one thing we've seen both in our research and research others have done, I think Chris will agree, is that folks are seeking a bit of the familiar right now. So because there is a bit of a feeling of safety tied into the familiar destinations. I've been there, I kind of know what it's going to be like. I'm a little less, maybe a little more risk averse right now. So something familiar to me might make me feel more comfortable. And so you have the opportunity to get that repeat visitation. And if they've been to your area before, they have a higher propensity to come again. In terms of the accommodations they use, as you can see, road trippers overwhelmingly use paid accommodations of some form or fashion compared to staying with their friends and relatives that leisure travelers do. They're only 5% do. So again, they have a higher propensity to use paid accommodations, which is great. Next slide. They're very unique also, as you can see from Anna Edna right there on the slide. Let's talk about what are some of the attributes that make them special and attractive to us. First of all is the length of trip planning. Because they are taking a road trip, they are tending to be a little less spontaneous than your average leisure traveler, a little more length and advanced time in planning. which means you have more time to engage with them and more time to help influence their decision-making process on where they're going to go and what they're going to do, etc. Next slide. And again, the trip planning sources, how do you engage with them? Look at this, almost across the board, they are a much higher propensity to use all of the primary trip planning sources that you would expect your leisure travelers to use, especially if you look on the third point down there, destination websites, almost 2.5 times more likelihood that they're going to engage with destination websites there. And obviously over 2 times more likely to even engage directly, reach out, phone, email, etc., to local tourism offices, etc. So you have a really good opportunity to influence these travelers. Next. And then again, how are they booking? As you can see, a higher propensity to book online, directly through the OTAs, the hotels, the short-term rental websites, etc. Next, please. And they are much more plugged in terms of how they're planning. And the next slide, you will see they are extremely more plugged in with their mobile devices as they're traveling. So you have the opportunity to influence them even while they're on the trip and in market. You can connect with them cleverly. There's that opportunity there as well. Next. And in terms of activities and experiences, look at their higher propensity to engage in a lot of those standard activities like shopping, but also landmarks, historical sites, national state parks, museums, cultural attractions, etc. They are craving those activities. And let's go to the next slide, please. Next slide, please. There you go. And in special interest activities, look at that, historic places, cultural attractions, culinary experiences. They are really curious and they want to learn more about the destinations that they're going through and they're planning and they're traveling through. Next, please. Household income, slightly more affluent than your average leisure traveler. The next slide. But, and also slightly more educated better educated than your average leisure travel. But the last point I want to bring home, I think, is the most important part, which is there really are a partnership opportunity. Let's dissect it let's look at one specific segment of road trippers, and we're going to talk about the longer road trippers. As you can see in this slide here, that the average nights of trip for overnight road trips has declined by at least two nights over the past 2 decades. As you see, from 6 to 4. It's been the same in terms of leisure travel. We've seen in the past decade alone, the average trip length declined by about a day. As people are more time compressed, they're taking more frequent, shorter getaways than longer. Let's go to the next slide. Well, we see there's 2 types of road trippers. We got the majority, almost 3/4, that are 4 nights or less, and then we've got this 1/4, which are 5 nights plus. But when we look at the 5 nights plus on the next slide here, you'll see that they are responsible for 45% of that 51 billion. So we've got a great opportunity here to hit that higher value road tripper. Let's delve into that just a little bit more here. Well, here's the economics of it. 5 flights nights versus the 4 nights or less average. It's a 2-to-1 spend almost, which is great. Let's go to the next slide. And again, look at this opportunity for engagement with them. The yellow bars represent the average road tripper, and this is that much more on top of that. So look at what their number 1 source of engagement with, destination websites. Again, for our DMO friends out there, you have great opportunities to engage with them. But even travel company websites, AAA, etc. Activities, experiences, again, even more so along the same lines that we were talking about with road trippers. It's all enhanced. And here's the thing, you've got a great opportunity here to get those multi-staters, those who are going for 3 states or more. That's the real sweet spot if you can get those folks. Let's go to the next slide. And matter of fact, some of these partnerships are already happening. So it's a great opportunity for collaboration, not just in-state. I know that Chris or Mike and Liz are going to tell you a little bit about some of their in-state partnerships and promotions that they're doing. But when you look at it even from a multi-state perspective, I know things might be different in terms of restrictions and so forth from state to state or region to region, but where you do have commonalities and you can collaborate. This is just one example. South Dakota and Wyoming, just prior to Labor Day, announced their partnership to promote their road trip there. So these are really clever, great ways to capture a limited share of the audience right now. Final thoughts, summing everything up. Well, we can see it doesn't take a magician to figure out that road trips are going to be the dominant share of leisure travel into 2021. But let's look at it from several different ways. First of all, visiting friends and relatives. If you look back at our travel sentiment data, you'll see that repeated pattern that people want to visit friends and relatives first, and they want a road trip out to see them. So let's, first of all, invite them. In Mike's state of Kentucky, one of their destinations, Lexington, launched a very clever program to get their locals to invite some of their friends and relatives from neighboring communities and neighboring states to come visit them. Secondly, in terms of visiting friends or relatives, because it bears saying it twice, think about how do you market to them? Look at where your audiences for visit friends or relatives are coming from, and look at the product you have along the way there. How do you collaborate and get them to spend a little more time going to and from, even if the end point may be Aunt Polly's house. Third, from the leisure perspective, of course, that's your sweet spot of opportunity. I just spent some time covering that in there, and so you definitely, for the limited leisure market you can do, here's an opportunity to grow some market share within the road trip markets. Those who are going to do a better job marketing the road trip, I think, are going to build some customer loyalty coming out of this and into the recovery, because again, they're going to start building familiarity with your region, and they'll see that they could have traveled safely, responsibly, and satisfied a lot of the cravings they've had in terms of travel along the way. Fourth, we're going to talk about groups just for a moment there when you're looking at meetings and conventions and so forth. I know they're very limited, very restricted, but small group meetings are going to start coming back first. We know that. As that happens, considering more regional drive market type of groups and meetings, and how do you work with those meeting organizers and market to these folks on the way to and from to kind mix that business and leisure combination. And then finally, you have the business traveler too, which again will likely kind of start resuscitating first with the close-in travel that's mostly predominantly going to be done by car. And again, how do you combine that leisure type of collaboration there? So that's my story. I'm sticking to it. I want to thank you all very much. And Chris, right back over to you.
Thanks so much. And we've got some questions coming in already, and I might come back to you, Amir, just at the end of my little update from Global. So just stay on camera for a couple of minutes and then I'll come back. Just wanted to highlight one critical takeaway. We emphasize this in the report, which is the concern and confusion around the pandemic. And this affects road trip travel as all types of travel. You can see there, over 86% of Americans are confused or concerned about restrictions, protocols, rules around mask wearing. Can I travel to certain states without quarantine, etc.? And this is a major impediment to travel. And if we look around the world, this is a recurring theme. Obviously, every destination is dealing with closed borders, pretty much. There are some tentative reopenings of international borders, and in fact, some quite innovative approaches in terms of how they're tackling that whole border issue. But if you look at Ireland, Canada, and Australia, we'll just take a quick look. Ireland, to Amir's point of macro-regional approach, they've divided the country into 4 regions. They've actually been doing this for some time. They're also doing this around their road trips. So 4 regions, various counties and cities in each of those are collaborating and cooperating across what they're actually doing. And the country's also got a charter, a COVID-19 health and safety charter, to try and address this, these concerns around COVID-19 and what's appropriate, what is not appropriate in terms of travel. And Ireland's ancient East is one of those examples. And in fact, you can see there on this page, they're actually encouraging people to staycation as well. So if you can't road trip travel, the recovery has to start locally, and so encouraging your locals to get out and about. Some great examples there. There's that COVID-19 charter that I was talking about. So they're not dissimilar to what's happened in New York and a number of other destinations. Got a clear set of rules and guidelines for businesses and visitors on what people can do, shouldn't do, etc. Let's duck around to the other side of the world. Australia. they've been encouraging people to holiday here this year. So obviously that import substitution effect where people cannot travel overseas, and in the United States that's over $150 billion that Americans typically spend on overseas holidays, is now up for grabs domestically. Road trips obviously provide a great part, and they've actually built a national portal so I can quickly understand in every state and every city what the rules, regulations are. So you can see on this next slide, they've got a friendly map interface for me to dive into each of the states, all the way down to city, county, and shire levels to understand what the nature of restrictions are and where and how I can travel. If we look just north of the border, Canada, road trips are again an important part of their domestic focus recovery. And obviously, just like the United States, they've got enormously expensive areas to travel. And they also have developed a national portal for educating visitors on the different restrictions, protocols, rules, and regulations around travel. So all of those provide great examples of tackling this fundamental issue of dealing with that concern and confusion. Here in the United States, of course, US Travel's been leading an initiative, hopefully everybody's aware of this, the Let's Go There program. And that's got some great inspirational content that everybody can use. They've got a whole toolkit you can download. But arguably the one missing component of this clarity at a national level around travel protocols, health protocols, rules, regulations to try and address that concern and confusion. Amir, what is the typical length of a road trip travel? Wayne and Corey and Joan are all asking for some direction on what's the sort of typical length and what's the typical length we're seeing during COVID-19? How many miles are people principally looking to drive?
Well, I know I put the data out there pretty quickly in the interest of time, but we've been asking folks in our travel sentiment during the pandemic about kind of 200 short trips that are shorter than 200 or longer than 200, and that's each way versus round trip there. So basically, a few hour road trip versus all day or longer type of drive in there. Again, there's no real average length. It's pretty self-defined by folks, and for some people, a 50-mile trip they see as a road trip. For others, it's a cross-country trek. But for the sake of our conversations, in light of around the pandemic, we've been looking at kind of at the short road trip being 200 miles, from a distance perspective, short road trip being 200 miles or less, or longer 200 or more. In terms of overall, we're tracking trends. We were really looking at the trip length in terms of time. So that's why we look at the shorter road trips being 4 days or less, and longer being the 5+.
Yeah, and I know we've looked at the issue of short versus longer term road trip travel around the COVID-19 research, and I think by a factor of 3 or 4 to 1, people have a preference to shorter trips, and arguably perhaps there's been, to your point, more risk aversion, and so people are looking to stay a little bit closer to home.
Yeah, we'll see the road trips happening first, and then the longer ones as they get more comfortable, obviously.
Yeah, yes, that's right. And just one final question before you can join us at the end for Q&A. What is the leisure norm made up of? So you were comparing road trip travelers and the leisure norm. Who is the leisure norm?
Yeah, so leisure norm is just the aggregated average of all the leisure trip segments for all the primary purposes of their leisure travel, whether they're city breaks or shopping trips or whatever the primary purpose might be for their leisure getaway. And so forth, and road trips are just one segment of that, and so when we just pull that one segment out, you can kind of see the big difference between the two.
Very good, thanks, Amir. Amir will join us right at the end for Q&A, but let's bring in now Liz and Mike. They'll pop back onto the camera. Welcome again, Mike and Liz, and we're going to kick it off with Liz, first of all, giving a little update and introduction to what they're doing in the great state of Maryland. So over to you, Liz.
Thank you. Of course, it's 2020 and I'm still technologically impaired, if you will, but I do want to thank Miles and Longwoods for all the work that they've done in providing this research since March. It's been invaluable to the Maryland Office of Tourism team in being able to make decisions and in some cases feel hopeful when you start seeing those trends up. So Travel to Byway, a road trip for recovery. When it was interesting when Amir was talking and he was talking about 20 and 22 years ago, it made me smile a little bit because my first road trip project started when I was pregnant with my son, who's now 21. So that puts that right at that 22-year mark. So for this discussion, I'm going to go back in reverse a little bit and talk about how we got to really start relying on road trips. We really looked at road trips back a long time ago was through the lens of the Scenic Byways program that was being run by our State Highway Administration. And recognizing that we could really take those byways, because they were really mostly local, and connect travelers to trip ideas. So some call them itineraries, but really mapping out how someone can get from point A to point B. And we looked at those byways that were already in place. There were some of them that were already done. We updated them. They were very confusing at the time. They had all these offshoots and, you know, because everyone wanted to make sure we covered everybody. And this was one of the first products. This is not the first ad, if you will, that is in our inset in our state highway map. And that was really about that partnership of being able to use other people's products to be able to promote these tours. So it really has been about these partnerships with our state agencies, our heritage areas, Main Streets, our federal delegations and National Park Service, and this federal Byway Highway Administration's programs, and with our GMO partners on really bringing these things to life. And Amir mentioned these jurisdictional travel, like from one state to the other. One of the first collaborations that came out of the gate with us was looking at what Virginia did with their Civil War Trails program and realizing that that idea was brilliant and it was really good, and why reinvent the wheel and create a new brand that would just confuse travelers. And here, 20 years later, there are several more states on board, and it really has become a much bigger product because our consumers don't understand when they travel between our states, except for that lovely welcome sign that we all aspire to. And again, was really thrilled when we saw the road trip research at the ESTO in Austin and said, oh my heavens, we're kind of on the right track. So we do have 18 byways. 7 of them are nationally recognized. And I'm going to talk a little bit about, if you can go to the next slide, please. September is International Underground Railroad Month. We've joined with our other partners on really being able to tell the significant story of the Underground Railroad. We are the birthplace of Harriet Tubman and Frederick Douglass. And again, this was another 20-year journey of working within, you can just stay on that one. I just love that other one, the mural. If you can go backwards, please. Of really being able to work with the community came to us and said, to the state and said, can you help us get there? Can you help us really honor Harriet Tubman? And we looked at each other, we scratched our heads and said, of course we can. We don't know how, but we're all going to work collaboratively. We're going to work with historians to make sure the story is accurate. And we're going to work with the community and really bring everyone together, have some discussions that were big. But so now you can go to the next one, if you don't mind. And then, but we needed to make sure we had all the pieces and parts. So this is the 2nd annual International Underground Railroad Month. And the Tubman Byway has a lot of collateral and content behind it that we've been building over the last couple of years. So we have a video that talks about the Harriet Tubman Underground Railroad Byway. We have a sizzle reel for the Harriet Tubman Underground Railroad Byway. We have this driving tour guide, and it has an audio component that's amazing, if I do say so. And that was all done in conjunction with our partners. Now, this byway, the Harriet Tubman Underground Railroad Byway, is 125 miles from Maryland through Delaware to Philadelphia to bring that story from where Harriet Tubman self-liberated and to her freedom in Philadelphia. And working with our other state tourism directors, we're getting, a lot of other folks are working into the International Underground Railroad Month. We were at a park dedication that I'll talk about in a minute on September 1st, and one of our newest employees, can you imagine, she started the week that we shut down. And so this is the second time I've seen her as a new employee. She's our social media coordinator. And she got it, she understood, and she looked at us as we were all standing around the Frederick Douglass statue in Easton at the courthouse. And she goes, can you imagine what the 10th annual International Underground Railroad Month will be like? So maybe there'll be a national trail by then. So there could be a really major road trip to work, learn more about the history of the Underground Railroad. Also, Frederick Douglass was born in Maryland, and we built this driving tour because we know that these stories are important. And we now have a park on the Tuckahoe River, which is right close to where Frederick Douglass was born. And our Lieutenant Governor kicked the month off by saying that recognizing the significance of the Underground Railroad and teaching about it is a wonderful and important step. And if you could just go to the next slide. Now, knowing all of that, we know from our research, we know from Amir's research from Longwoods, we know from requests to our website and our call center that road trips, Civil War, Underground Railroad are the most frequently requested materials that we're being asked for. But we also know that the road trips, you know, there's the learning, because I think all of us can think back when we were kids and our parents threw us in a station wagon and made us go somewhere, and it's like, you know, oh, I remember being at Antietam and hearing a kid say to his dad, oh, goody, another Civil War battlefield. And it was just, it went right through my heart. But then I remember, you know, my parents taking me on the trail of the American Revolutionary War when I was a kid and kind of feeling the same way. So how do we make it exciting? How do we make it engaging? And how do we show that the journey encapsulates eating great seafood, going to great downtowns, shopping at, makers markets, going to a corn maze, and doing all those other things. So that's where we really, because that's the economic impact. We've also worked in the community with certified host program and being able to have people ready to welcome their visitors. So I'm going to go to the next slide, please. So back in February, club soda, not a beer, I promise, or hard salsa. In February this year, we were working with our publishing partner, Miles, and really talking about the road trip. And it's almost as if, never mind, I'm not even going to go there because that's just horrible thoughts. So we really did start talking about the road trip. We started talking about our Scenic Byways magazine. We were running low on quantity. What did we want to do with it? What was the research that we needed to do? All of those questions were tumbling about in our minds. And, 75% of our people who visit Maryland come by car. We're also sitting in one of the most populous regions in the country, and we're sitting within 6 of the richest counties in the United States, according to Forbes. And I don't know what just happened. Did I just go away? My camera just went away, didn't it? Okay, I'm going to keep talking, unless that's why I do this on film. Okay, thanks, guys.
We can still hear you, Liz. So yeah, just round out your presentation. Yep,
I'm gonna keep going because that's what I do. So the Scenic Byways, the guide, as I was just saying, and we looked at that product and we said, you know what? Instead of making it as a standalone, let's fully integrate it into our guide. And we did. And this will be out in January. You're seeing a lot of stuff that no one's seen. So shh. But this is our travel guide, Hit Our Scenic Byways for a Real Maryland Adventure, open for road trips. Our marketing moniker is open. We went to that campaign in 2019, and it's been interesting as we go forward through the reopening of our states, right? And then here, if you could just show these ads. So these are our digital ads. Starting next Monday, actually, let me step back a second. So in working with our DMO community, we were having discussions about how we reignite the tourism industry. How do we start driving demand? How do we start inviting people to come back? We did a summer campaign, which basically embodied, when you're open for travel, we're open for you. And now as more of our destinations have opened, and now that we see with the Longwoods research that people have this pent-up demand for travel, I was on my way out to the mountains on Labor Day weekend, and I was stuck in a traffic jam on I-70. And that's been the first time that I've seen that. Our beach destinations, so people are traveling, coming back to and from the beach. We're starting to see those traffic jams that we traditionally see over the summer. So this is our open for the destination. It's exploring our byways, exploring our road trips, and really inviting people to get out on the road. We know they're going to be more comfortable in their own car. We know that they're wanting to travel. Our mountain destinations, their accommodations taxes were up 22% with the same rate as last year. Ocean City said that their Labor Day, some of their hotels had the best weekend ever. So people are wanting to travel. So starting next week, and the DMO said, rather than dividing a really small pie, why don't you, because the byways, the 18 byways cover every county and jurisdiction in the state, said, why doesn't the Maryland Office of Tourism take all of the assets that you've developed over the years, the videos, the sizzle reels, the marketing materials, and why don't you drive that traffic and do it through your channels? So we said thank you, and we've created these. And I do want to show you the TV spots that will start running next Monday.
It's never about just the road, but being open for where the road takes you. Open for something other than the same four walls. Open for a night away, having someone else make the bed, and just, well, getting out. So hit the road, Jack, and everyone else who's open, because Maryland is open for you. Skip the highways and be open for the byways.
So that's our road trip story. Mask on Maryland. It's a campaign that we did to encourage people to wear their masks. So thank you for this opportunity. Thank you to Miles. And I can't wait to hear from Mike, my thoroughbred buddy down in Kentucky.
Yes. Thanks so much, Liz. And let's bring in Mike straight away for his brief overview of what the wonderful state of Kentucky is doing.
Well, thanks, Chris, and thanks to Miles and Longwoods. We'll echo what Liz said about all the help and research that you have been providing to our industry. It's been invaluable to us, as you'll see in my presentation. And whenever we're in a situation like this, it always reminds me of my basketball career. I was in the 20-20 club, which meant I got in if we were 20 up, 20 down with 20 seconds left. So I don't know what I can add to this that hadn't already been said, but I'm going to give it a go. Part of the opportunity, if you will, for Kentucky is that we're already a drive destination. We always have been. As you see on the screen, 88% of our overnight visitors drove to Kentucky in 2019, and that's nothing new from research going back, 20, 25 years. The other thing that we look at is, as Amir pointed out, we over-index compared to the U.S. norm on VFR, touring, outdoor activities, visiting historical sites. And we have existing itineraries for road trips and day trips for all of these. So it really gives us an opportunity for many of our smaller communities as well. And I think those of you who are either in a smaller community or in a state that has a number of small communities, I think this is an opportunity for them to pull folks out of the gateways and to get out more and see more of your state. So, and this is key that people tend to forget because of our location. You know, some people in the South don't think we're Southern. Some people in the North all think we're Southern. But we're within a 4 to 5 hour drive of all these metros. And I'm not going to sit here and read them to you, but at some point in Kentucky, you're within a 4 to 5 hour drive of that. That's huge opportunity for us. We have major arteries, Interstate 65 and 75, bisect us, as well as Interstate 64. We get a lot of folks coming in on their way back and forth from Florida or the Gulf Coast for vacations, and we're trying to pull them off the roads a little bit more often. So next slide, please. What we've tried to do is really take advantage of that, cognizant of the fact that, like many of you, we are struggling with our budget. We're funded by a 1% transient tax, statewide transient tax. But we wanted to put something together that wasn't just the aspirational spots that a lot of folks are putting out there. We're really trying to drive traffic. And you can see here the campaign objectives that we were looking for through this. And what I want to show you, really the key on this one is the bottom one. We wanted to remind Kentuckians that they don't have to travel far to be transported a world away. I think Liz mentioned this. You know, we hear so often that people say, I went to that state park when I was a kid and I haven't been back, or I visited that historic site, or I did this, or I've never been there. And that's what we're trying to generate. So what I want to show you now, next slide, please, are two parts of an overall campaign that we're working on. One is a social media program that was the brainchild of our communications director, Angela Blank, that talked about, as you can see, the hashtag TravelKY, which is our normal hashtag, and you add road trip on it. We're doing right now, plan on doing one of these per month, launch at the week of, first one launched in mid-August, I guess. Second is actually happening right now. We'll talk about that in just a second. We use 3 primary social media platforms: Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Next slide, please. What we did, as you can see on the screen, 5 days of content, 1 post per platform, or 1 story per day on those 3. This first slide really was just kind of the teaser that came out and got all of our social media followers to say, hey, this is coming, be prepared, let's get ready. Next slide, please. That was an Instagram one. Here you see one of the Facebook versions that we did. This was in our Red River Gorge area, which is in eastern Kentucky, and it's a great rock climbing area, world-renowned rock climbing area. Next slide, please. Day 2, this is one of our state parks, Jenny Wiley in far eastern Kentucky. We did this on Instagram, and again, I'm just giving you quick examples of what we were doing on each of the platforms. And we highlighted down there the engagement. If you recall on one of the earlier slides, one of our objectives was really to raise the engagement level. Next slide, please. And then we were asking our partners to repost it. You see, this was Visit Prestonsburg, where the state park is located, helped promote this for us. And again, we're reaching out and working with our local partners. Let me also back up and say that this was all done in-house. I said we were cognizant of our staff, and when I say in-house, we sent our staff out, not our social media staff, because right now I don't have a full-time social media person. We're sending staff out who maybe some of their job duties, whether they're teleworking or whatever else, we're sending them out, taking these shots, and a lot of the shots through the campaign are actually their family members who are a part of it. Next slide, please. And then this is day 3 and 4, as you can see. And if you're not familiar with Kentucky, we're a very long state, not very north-south, but east-west. We're a very long state. We border 7 states. And we try in each of these social media campaigns to cover as much of that as we possibly can. The first 2 that you saw were in eastern Kentucky. These are in our far western Kentucky. That's about a 6 to 7 hour drive just there to get between those destinations. So through this, we're just trying to get that interest up and really get people, mainly in Kentucky. I will say this, the social media is not targeted in Kentucky, but the media campaign I'm about to show you is, to say, where's that? I want to go there. Next slide, please. And then this was the Instagram story where you get the different 5 slides and try to add value for our partners, locations, and attractions. Next slide, please. This week, if you want to take a look, as I said, it's ongoing. We're featuring Mammoth Cave National Park, Bernheim Arboretum, which is just outside of Louisville, a 16,000-acre research forest, one of our legendary distilleries, Shaker Hill, and Danville, Kentucky, which is really where Kentucky was founded. So next slide, please. So the next portion of this is really our ad campaign. Like many of you, we pulled our advertising when COVID first hit. We've been very, very cognizant and following the traveler sentiment surveys that Amir and his group been putting together about when is the right time to go back in market. We have decided, at least for now, to run in-state only, and we're probably going to expand that next week into some of our drive markets. Flexibility on this is incredibly key. As I said, we're surrounded by a lot of urban areas, and we have to watch the virus rates, the positivity rates. Our governor has a travel advisory to states with higher than 15%. That's changing regularly. So that's why we made the decision to go in-state only. But as we see those starting to drop off and lower, we're going into a lot of those markets I mentioned earlier. And real quickly, I just want to show you our campaign is stay close, go far. Find what, there's a world waiting here, right here in Kentucky. These are some print executions. Next slide, please. These are our digital executions. And again, trying to get across to everybody the outdoor activities. In most of this, you're showing small groups, socially distanced. All of this was shot from existing footage, so we didn't have anything in the can of people wearing masks or anything like that. And then the next slide is our TV spot that I want to show you.
Mountains come to life. Rivers and lakes welcome you back. The open road calls. Kentucky is full of outdoor adventures and charming towns right here at home. Stay close, go far. Plan your getaway at KentuckyTourism.com.
So that's the campaign. Chris, back to you.
Thanks so much, Mike. And Amir, why don't you rejoin us for discussion and Q&A? So I'll kick it off with the question about multi-state. So we saw in the research that Amir provided, the significant opportunity with states working together. That's happened a little bit in the past. Arguably, there's a big opportunity coming out of this crisis. So Mike first and then Liz, what additional plans do you have about as the recovery proceeds, perhaps collaborating with other states?
Yeah, we don't have any specific plans right now I'd be very open to that. One thing that we do have, we work very closely with Travel South USA, and Travel South has a program with the United States Civil Rights Trail that covers most of our partner states in Travel South, but also others reaching up into Washington, D.C. and Kansas. That's been successful. I see a lot of opportunity there for us.
Very good. Liz? I think you're muted, Liz. Yeah, we still can't hear you, Liz. Let me go to another question just while, here we go. Go ahead, Liz.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay. I have no idea what's going on. Anyway, so we work with Capital Region USA, which is Virginia, D.C., and us internationally, much like Mike was mentioning with Travel South. But the International Underground Railroad Month promotion has really ignited, and we're up to 9 states. We thought it was 7 that we would be very happy with as far as our set goal. And we talk with Pennsylvania all the time, especially as it deals with the Civil War. And our byways are multi-jurisdictional. Journey Through Hollow Ground, which goes from Gettysburg to Monticello, is that type of collaboration and cooperation. So we do it frequently. And then maybe Mike and I can get something going maybe next year for a Derby Mint Julep versus Black Eyed Susan promotion, and we'll bring Belmont in just for the fun of it. But we're always open for working with any of our partners.
Yeah.
Or
yeah.
pending partners.
Chris, one thing I would say too that we've seen, it's kind of grown organically here. Amir mentioned Lexington and what they were doing really regionally and doing some things. We've also had some of our DMOs in the state cross trade or swap social media posts, for instance, and go to Georgetown, Kentucky, for instance, or Georgetown may show Henderson, Kentucky, and Henderson may show Georgetown, just to kind of get that added exposure. And I think it's a great idea, and I think it's been pretty successful as well. So you're getting that organic growth here in Kentucky, and I'm sure other places where it's not necessarily state to state, but it's CVB to CVB.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, moving on, we've got a couple of questions just about the makeup of road trip travelers. Amir, is it true to say that African Americans and Hispanics are underrepresented currently amongst US road trip travelers?
Yeah, that's true. They are a very small percentage in the overall mix. I think there's some great opportunity there. I know a lot of destinations, even pre-COVID and current situations, we're really ramping up some of their marketing to those specific segments. But right now it's a very small percentage, making up, quite frankly, less than 10% of the overall road trip profile.
Yeah, so it's another one of those, diversity is another one of those issues that's particularly pertinent at the moment. So Liz and then Mike, is there anything you'd highlight? Liz, you obviously shared the Underground Railway, which is, a story for all Americans, but particularly engaging with African Americans. Is there anything else you'd highlight in terms of your drive to get a more diverse road trip traveler?
Well, with our media outlet choices, that is encompassed within that media plan, but we always look at, being open to all road trip travelers. One thing that we have seen, I don't know if I have much research to back it up, is the reunion market has, with the opening of the Harriet Tubman Underground Railroad State Park, the reunion market are, instead of going maybe to the home of grandma and grandpa and the family, they're actually coming into Maryland and having their reunions here and going to the Harriet Tubman Underground Railroad Park and traveling the Byway as they're out of their home reunion space and doing that. And we've seen a lot, our hotels like around our major airport, BWI, have seen that trend and are working to market towards that trend to do that, because it's a great place because it's centrally located. There's Harriet Tubman, the park, the birthplace, and then there's the African American Museum of History and Culture in DC, and being able to put your center point in Maryland is something that we're definitely working on and towards.
Very good. Mike, anything you'd highlight?
What I would say is we have to be very intentional about it. We have a rich history with African American history, but I don't know that as a state we have done a good job of marketing that. Kentucky, our population, we're 87% white, and we just, it's one of my goals to be much more intentional about how we are marketing and where we are marketing. And taking those approaches. We've got, I mentioned the U.S. Civil Rights Trail, but there's so much more history here that we just have not, and I hate using the phrase taken advantage of, but highlighted might be a better way of saying it. And I really am, and our staff is working very hard to be intentional about what we are offering and making sure that we're inclusive in our marketing in the demographic that we're going after.
Very good. Yeah, and I think Liz, you highlighted reunions. That whole visiting friends and relatives presents a great opportunity. Hispanics, for example, have predisposed towards reconnecting with family and friends, and so that is a great gateway into those communities. So let's just wrap up the panel discussion there. Just a couple of final resources before we sign off. So a reminder, all the resources are available up on our Road Trips website, and you can see the URL right there, milespartnership.com, USA Road Trips. So slides, webinar recordings, much more. We've summarized and shared the executive summary of a major global review of domestic tourism best practices, which actually includes a number of the themes we talked about today in Road Trips. So that looked at over 30 countries, identified 5 international best practices, so please take advantage of that. That's all available on our website. And then Funding Futures, which was our major review with Civitas, Tourism Economics, looking at the future of DMO and tourism funding. Just a reminder, the report, the individual sections of the report are all available up on that website, along with webinar recordings. We had over 1,300 DMOs sign up for the big webinar we held on August 20th. We've got a couple of webinars coming up, including one with our Canadian colleagues and friends on Thursday, and then next Tuesday we're diving into reserves and short-term rental revenue. And we found out in our work that only around a quarter of DMOs are currently receiving any revenue from short-term rental revenue. So a big area of opportunity. Okay, well, thank you so much to Mike and to Liz for sharing your insights, expertise, and examples. For Amir, all the wonderful work that you and the whole team at Longwoods International have put into the research. We greatly appreciate it. And thanks to everybody who joined us today. So stay safe, stay well. We hope we'll connect with you in person at a future event, or who knows, out on the road. Have a great rest of your day. Goodbye.
Thank you, guys.
Bye, everyone.